The massive hall on Viridian Prime buzzed with alien voices. 12 different species had gathered for an event that happened only once every 100 years. The trial of sustenance would decide which race deserved access to the rich outer worlds of the galaxy. Yenwoo Kim stood quietly near the human section. He watched the other species with calm eyes. At 43 years old, he had survived more dangerous places than most beings could imagine. Earth's military had sent him to frozen mountains, burning deserts and poisonous jungles. He always came back alive. Next to him, So-Young Park studied her tablet. The 38-year-old scientist knew more about alien biology than almost any human. She had spent 15 years learning how different species survived in harsh conditions. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her dark eyes missed nothing. "Look at them," whispered Tae-min, the youngest of their group. At 26, the engineer was eager to prove humans belonged among the galaxy's great races. He pointed at the Dominion representatives. "Those lizard warriors are huge. Each one is twice our size." Ji-Hai, their medic, shook her head. At 35, she had treated injuries from every kind of environment. "Size does not always win," she said softly. "I have seen big creatures die from small mistakes." The Galactic Council called for silence. High above them, the council speaker floated in a bubble of energy. Its voice echoed through translation devices in every language. "The trial of sustenance will test your species as never before," the speaker announced. "Caro 7 is a death world. Nothing lives there naturally. The air burns. The cold kills. The creatures hunt in packs and show no mercy." Murmurs spread through the hall. Some species had never heard of such a place. 4 representatives from each species will be sent to different parts of the world, the speaker continued. "You will have no communication devices, no weapons except what you can make, no food except what you can find or kill. You must survive alone for 30 standard days." The word alone hit the alien representatives like a physical blow. The collective and insect-like species began clicking frantically. They had never been separated from their hive mind. Even for a few minutes, isolation drove them to panic. The Dominion warriors looked uncomfortable too. Their entire culture was built on pack hunting. They trained together, fought together, and survived together. The idea of hunting alone seemed impossible. Near the back, the consortium representatives flickered like living light. These energy beings usually fed on solar radiation, sharing power between themselves. On a world that blocked their connection to stars, they would struggle badly. Only the humans seemed calm. "Why are they not worried?" asked Veltar of the Dominion, pointing at the human group with one clawed finger. "Perhaps they do not understand the danger," replied Zix Nala of the collective. Her mandibles clicked nervously. "Humans are weak. They have no natural weapons, no thick skin, no special abilities. They only survive because of their machines." The council speaker continued explaining the rules. "Each day you survive earns points for your species. But survival alone is not enough. You must also gather resources. The species that accumulates the most will win access to the outer spiral territories." This caused more worry among the aliens. Not only did they have to survive alone, but they also had to compete for resources. Most species shared everything equally among their members. The idea of gathering more than they needed felt wrong. Hyunwoo listened to the alien discussions with interest. He had expected this reaction. Most species in the galaxy had evolved as social creatures. They depended on their groups for everything. Humans were different. They could work together when needed, but they could also survive completely alone. "The death world has many dangers," the speaker warned. "Predators the size of your shuttles roam the frozen wastes. Poisonous plants cover the swamplands. Volcanic activity makes the ground unsafe. Weather storms can destroy shelters in minutes. Most who go to Cairo 7 never return." So-Young raised her hand. "What exactly counts as a resource?" "Anything that helps survival," the speaker replied. "Food, water, shelter materials, tools, medicines. The more you gather, the higher your score." The collective representative spoke up, her voice shaking. "How can we be expected to survive without our hive? We share all thoughts, all knowledge. Alone we are nothing." "That is why this is a trial," the speaker said coldly. "Only the strongest species deserve the outer worlds. Those worlds are harsh and dangerous. Weak species would only die there." A Dominion warrior stepped forward. "Our ancestors conquered 1,000 worlds through pack hunting. We do not hunt alone. It goes against our nature." "Then perhaps your species is not ready for this challenge," the speaker replied. The humans remained quiet during these exchanges. Other species began to notice their silence. "Why do the humans say nothing?" demanded the consortium representative, its energy form pulsing red with anger. "Do they think they are better than us?" Hyun-woo finally spoke. His voice was calm and clear. "We have no complaints about the rules." This shocked everyone. Even humans were social creatures. How could they be comfortable with complete isolation? Taemin grinned at the alien stares. "We train for this kind of thing," he said. "Human soldiers often work alone behind enemy lines. Our scientists explore dangerous places by themselves. Our doctors treat patients in isolated areas." "But you are still weak," insisted the Dominion warrior. "You have no claws, no fangs, no thick hide. What weapons will you use against the great predators of Kairos 7? Jihai smiled. "We will make weapons. Humans are good at making tools." "From what materials?" asked the collective representative. "The Death World has no metals, no advanced materials. We will use what we find," So Young said simply. "Humans have always been good at adapting." The alien representatives looked at each other with confusion. The humans seemed confident, but they appeared to be the weakest species in the room. They were smaller than the Dominion, less connected than the collective, and less advanced than the consortium. The council speaker began the final briefing. "Transport ships leave in 6 hours. Each representative will be dropped at a different location on Kairos 7. You will have basic environmental suits that will keep you alive for 3 days. After that, you must find your own air, water, and warmth." As the meeting ended, representatives from other species approached the humans. "Perhaps we could form an alliance," suggested a Dominion warrior. "When we meet on the world, we could share resources." Hyun-woo shook his head. "The rules forbid communication between species. We must all survive alone." "But surely you do not plan to actually gather resources alone?" asked the collective representative. "When this trial ends, our species could share what we have found. We plan to follow the rules exactly," So Young said firmly. The aliens walked away, more confused than ever. The humans were either very confident or very stupid. Most assumed they were stupid. As they prepared to leave, Taemin looked at his teammates. "They really think we cannot survive alone." "Let them think that," Jihai said. "They will understand soon enough." Hyun-woo checked his equipment one final time. Everything was ready. He had survived in worse places than Kairos 7, though he had never been forbidden from helping others who were struggling. That last thought made him pause. The trial rules said they could not communicate with other species, but they said nothing about sharing resources if they happened to find other survivors. He smiled slightly. Perhaps the other species were about to learn something important about humans. Sometimes the best way to win was to make sure everyone else won too. But first, they had to prove they could survive better than anyone expected, and Hyun-woo was very confident they could do exactly that. The transport ship shuddered as it entered Kairos 7's atmosphere. Through the small porthole, Hyun-woo watched the Death World grow larger. Ice covered most of the continent. Dark storms swirled across the frozen surface. Lightning flashed constantly in the purple-gray clouds. "Drop zone approaching," announced the ship's computer. "Participant Hyun-woo Kim, prepare for insertion." Hyun-woo strapped on his basic survival pack. It contained only emergency supplies, a small shelter, 3 days of water, and some energy bars. Everything else he would have to find or make himself. The drop pod sealed around him. Moments later, he was falling through the screaming wind toward the ice below. He landed hard in a snowdrift. The pod's emergency beacon would bring rescue in 30 days if he survived that long. Around him stretched an endless white wasteland. The wind never stopped howling. The temperature was far below freezing. Hyun-woo stood up and looked around calmly. He had trained in places like this. The first rule was simple: do not panic. Panic killed faster than cold or hunger. He began walking, looking for shelter from the wind. Behind him, his footprints filled with snow within minutes. This world wanted to erase any sign that he existed. 3 kilometers away, So Young's pod crashed into a poisonous swamp. Green gas rose from the murky water. Strange plants with thorns like needles covered every surface. The air itself seemed to burn her throat. She activated her environmental suit's filters and began testing the atmosphere. The readings were terrible. Most of the gas would kill her in hours. Some of the plants would kill her in minutes if she touched them, but So Young was a scientist. Where others saw only death, she saw an ecosystem. Every ecosystem had rules. Learn the rules and you could survive in any environment. She began taking samples. being very careful not to touch anything with her bare hands. Meanwhile, Taemin's pod slammed into dense forest. Massive trees blocked most of the light. Strange howls echoed through the darkness. Something large crashed through the undergrowth nearby. He climbed the nearest tree and looked around. This forest was full of predators. He could see glowing eyes watching him from the shadows. They were waiting for him to come down. Most people would have stayed in the tree until they starved. But Taemin was an engineer. Engineers solved problems. He began studying the predators' behavior, looking for patterns. Far across the continent, HFY landed near a volcanic field. The ground was hot enough to cook meat. Poisonous gases leaked from cracks in the rock. Everything smelled like sulfur and death. She tested the air and grimaced. This place was trying to kill her in at least 6 different ways. But she was a medic. She understood how bodies worked, and she understood how they died. Knowing how things died meant knowing how to keep them alive. She began looking for safe paths through the volcanic maze. While the humans began their survival routines, the alien representatives were having serious problems. The collective members were screaming. Without their hive-mind connection, they felt like parts of their souls had been torn away. They huddled in their shelters, too traumatized to search for food or water. The Dominion warriors kept making mistakes that would have been impossible in a pack. One tried to hunt a large predator alone and barely escaped with his life. Another fell into a hidden pit because he had no teammate to watch his back. The consortium representatives were worst of all. The planet's magnetic field blocked their connection to stellar energy. They were slowly starving, and nothing they found could replace their normal food source. Back in the frozen wasteland, Hyunwoo had found what he was looking for, a small cave in a rocky hill. It was not much, but it would keep the wind off him while he worked. He spent the first day improving his shelter. Using rocks and his emergency blanket, he created a wind barrier. He dug a sleeping pit to trap warm air. He built a small fire pit from stones. On the second day, he began making tools. Sharp rocks became knives. Straight branches became spears. Vines became rope. By the end of the day, he had a complete hunting kit. On the third day, his emergency supplies ran out. Now the real test began, but Hyunwoo was not worried. He had seen tracks in the snow. Large tracks. Something big lived in this wasteland, and big meant meat. In the poisonous swamp, So-Young was conducting experiments. She had discovered that some of the toxic plants could neutralize others. By mixing the right chemicals, she could make the air safer to breathe. She also found something interesting. Small fish lived in the cleaner parts of the swamp water. If she could purify enough water, she could catch them for food. By the end of her third day, she had created a small safe zone around her shelter. The air was clean enough to breathe without filters. The water was clean enough to drink. She even had a few fish cooking over her fire. Taemin had made an important discovery about the forest predators. They hunted in packs, but they followed strict patterns. They used the same trails every day. They rested in the same places. They were creatures of habit. Habits could be exploited. He began setting traps along their hunting routes, not to kill them yet, but to study them more closely. He needed to understand their weaknesses before he tried to hunt them. HFY had found something valuable in the volcanic field: heat. Where other survivors were struggling to stay warm, she was learning to use the volcanic vents to her advantage. She discovered she could cook food using the natural steam. She could purify water by boiling it in volcanic pools. She could even warm her shelter by digging channels to direct hot air underground. By day 5, the differences were becoming clear. The alien representatives were getting weaker. They had barely managed to find enough food and water to stay alive. Most were using their emergency supplies very carefully, trying to make them last as long as possible. The humans were doing something completely different. They were getting stronger. Hyunwoo had killed his first ice predator. It was a creature like a giant wolf, but with thick fur and massive teeth. He had trapped it in a narrow passage where it could not use its speed. His spear had found its heart on the first throw. Now he had more meat than he could eat in a week. He spent time learning to preserve it in the ice and snow. He used the creature's fur to improve his clothing. He used its bones to make better tools. So-Young had turned her small safe zone into a growing garden. She was cultivating the less poisonous plants for food. She had domesticated some of the small swamp creatures. Her area was becoming a tiny ecosystem that could support her indefinitely. Tae-min had killed his first forest predator. It was one of the pack hunters caught alone when it investigated one of his traps. He used its own pack tactics against it, driving it into a dead-end ravine where he could attack safely. The meat would feed him for days. The hide would make better clothing. The bones would make stronger weapons. Ji-hai had discovered underground water sources heated by volcanic activity. She had also found lizards that lived in the thermal vents. They were slow from the heat and easy to catch. Their meat was actually quite good when cooked properly. By day 10, each human had solved their basic survival needs. They had reliable food sources, clean water, warm shelter, and effective tools. They were no longer just surviving. They were thriving. More importantly, they were accumulating surplus resources. Each human was gathering more food, materials, and supplies than they needed for personal survival. To the watching Galactic Council, this was puzzling. Why would they waste energy gathering extra resources? The logical strategy was to find just enough to survive and then conserve energy. But the humans kept hunting, kept gathering, kept building. Their stockpiles grew larger every day. They were preparing for something, but the council could not understand what. Day 15 brought a cold dawn to the frozen wasteland. Yunwoo stood outside his improved shelter, breathing steam in the frigid air. Around him lay the results of 10 days of careful work. His shelter was no longer just a cave. He had built walls from ice blocks, created multiple rooms, and installed a ventilation system that kept the inside warm while preventing carbon monoxide poisoning. Piles of preserved meat filled an entire ice chamber. Furs and hides hung from drying racks. Tools and weapons lined the walls in organized rows. He had become a hunter. The ice predators that had seemed so dangerous on his first day now avoided his territory. They had learned that the strange two-legged creature was more dangerous than they were. Yunwoo had killed 7 of them. Each hunt taught him more about their behavior and weaknesses. But the most important discovery was that he had far more meat than one person could ever eat. Even working hard in the cold, he could not consume food fast enough to reduce his growing stockpile. In the poisonous swamp, So Young had performed a minor miracle. Her original safe zone had expanded into a complex of interconnected clean areas. She had learned to neutralize the worst toxins and cultivate the edible plants. Her fish traps brought in fresh protein every day. More importantly, she had begun to understand the swamp's ecosystem. The poisonous plants were not just random killers. They were part of a complex chemical cycle. Some plants produced toxins that other plants needed to survive. By carefully managing this cycle, she could control which areas were safe and which were deadly. She had also discovered something the council had not mentioned. Some of the swamp plants had incredible medicinal properties. When properly processed, they could treat injuries, fight infections, and boost energy levels. She was accumulating a pharmacy of natural medicines. Like Hyunwoo, she had more resources than she needed. Her food supplies could last for months. Her medicine stockpile could treat dozens of patients. Deep in the forest, Taemin had become the apex predator. The pack hunters that once terrified him now feared the sound of his footsteps. He had learned their language of growls and howls. He knew their territory markers and social structures. He could predict their movements better than they could themselves. His hunting success was extraordinary. In the past week, he had killed 12 of the large predators. Their meat filled multiple smoking racks. Their hides were processed into clothing and rope. Their bones had become an arsenal of weapons and tools. But more than that, he had begun to domesticate some of the smaller forest creatures. They brought him information about predator movements and helped him set more effective traps. The forest was becoming his ally instead of his enemy. His surplus resources were massive. He had enough meat to feed a small army and enough materials to equip them. Near the volcanic fields, Ji-hee had transformed the hostile environment into a thriving base camp. She had mapped every safe path through the volcanic maze. She had learned to predict eruptions and gas releases. She had found the underground water sources and the thermal zones perfect for cooking. The lizards that lived in the thermal vents were no longer her only food source. She had discovered edible roots that grew in volcanic soil. She had learned to process certain minerals into medicines and tools. She had even found a way to forge basic metal items using volcanic heat. Her medical supplies were extensive. She could treat burns, cuts, poisoning, infection, and dozens of other conditions using materials found in the volcanic fields. Her food stores were equally impressive. All 4 humans had achieved something the Galactic Council considered impossible. They had not only survived in complete isolation, they had thrived. Each had become a master of their environment, but their success revealed something that puzzled the watching aliens. The humans were still gathering resources at an increasing rate. Their stockpiles grew larger every day, far beyond what they needed for personal survival. "Why do they continue hunting?" asked Veltar of the Dominion Council. "They have enough food for the remainder of the trial." "Perhaps they are instinctively greedy," suggested Zixnala of the Collective. "Some species hoard resources even when they do not need them." But the council speaker was not convinced. "Their behavior suggests planning for something beyond the trial." But what could they be planning? Meanwhile, the alien representatives on Cairo 7 were struggling badly. The Collective members had managed to stop screaming, but they were barely functional. Without their hive mind, they could not make complex decisions. They had found minimal food and were slowly starving. The Dominion warriors were making progress, but their pack hunting instincts kept causing problems. They would start to stalk prey, then hesitate because they had no teammates to coordinate with. Several had been injured by predators they should have been able to kill easily. The consortium representatives were failing catastrophically. Unable to feed on stellar energy, they were consuming their own life force to stay alive. 2 had already died. The others were growing weaker by the day. "The humans are outperforming all other species," reported the council speaker to the full Galactic Assembly. "Their resource accumulation rates are unprecedented." "Impossible," declared the Dominion representative. "Humans are weak. They have no natural weapons, no special abilities. How can they be succeeding where our warriors fail?" "They appear to have exceptional individual adaptability," the speaker replied. "Each human has developed completely different survival strategies based on their specific environment. This flexibility is allowing them to master conditions that other species cannot handle." The Collective representative clicked nervously, but they are still gathering far more resources than they need. No rational being would waste energy on unnecessary accumulation. That was the puzzle. Every species understood basic survival economics. Gather enough to live, then conserve energy for emergencies. The humans seemed to be violating this fundamental principle. On day 18, something new happened. Hyun-woo made a discovery that changed everything. While tracking a herd of ice creatures, he found evidence of other survivors in a valley 20 kilometers from his territory. The tracks were not human. They belonged to one of the alien species, and the tracks told a story of desperation. The creature was starving. Its footprints showed it stumbling frequently. It had tried to hunt the ice predators but failed badly. Blood in the snow indicated it was injured. Hyun-woo stood in the alien's tracks for a long time, thinking. The trial rules said he could not communicate with other species. But they said nothing about sharing resources if he happened to encounter another survivor. He looked back toward his shelter with its massive stockpiles of food and supplies. He had enough to last for months. The alien had perhaps days before it died of starvation or cold. In the swamp, So Young made a similar discovery. She found broken equipment and signs of struggle near the edge of her safe zone. One of the consortium representatives had tried to cross the poisonous area and barely escaped alive. The energy being was clearly dying, unable to find anything that could sustain its alien metabolism. So Young looked at her extensive medicine stockpile and food supplies. She had created treatments that could help almost any biological system. She had more resources than she could use in a lifetime. Taemin and Jihai made their own discoveries around the same time. The forest and volcanic fields both showed signs of failing alien survivors. The other species were dying while the humans accumulated abundance. Each human faced the same choice: follow the trial rules strictly and let the aliens die, or find a way to help without breaking the prohibition on communication. It was not really a choice at all. Humans had never been good at watching others suffer when they had the power to help. They began to make preparations. Day 25 arrived with the worst storm in Cairo 7's recorded history. Hurricane-force winds screamed across the continent. Lightning struck constantly, setting fires that the rain immediately extinguished. The temperature dropped so low that even Hyun-woo's improved shelter struggled to stay warm. The storm was not natural. Seismic sensors detected massive tectonic activity deep beneath the planet's surface. The volcanic fields erupted with new violence. The frozen rivers cracked and shifted. Even the poisonous swamps boiled with increased chemical activity. But the worst part was what the storm revealed. new paths between the different regions of the continent. Chasms opened in the ice, creating bridges across previously impassable terrain. Landslides cleared blocked valleys. For the first time since the trial began, it was possible to travel between the areas where different participants had been dropped. In the council chambers on Viridian Prime, emergency alarms sounded. Seismic activity on Kairos 7 has exceeded all safety parameters, reported the monitoring station. We are detecting massive geological changes across the entire continent. The council speaker reviewed the data with growing concern. How many participants are still alive? Sensors show 11 life signs remaining, came the reply. All 4 humans are active and healthy. Only 7 aliens are still alive, and 3 of those are failing rapidly. The speaker studied the readings more carefully. The alien survivors were scattered across the continent, most of them trapped in areas that were becoming increasingly dangerous. The storm had destroyed what little shelter they had managed to build. Their emergency supplies were exhausted. Without immediate help, most would die within days. Should we abort the trial? Asked a council member. The conditions have exceeded the planned parameters. No, the speaker decided after a long pause. The trial must continue. These are the exact conditions the outer worlds will present. Any species that cannot handle this level of crisis does not deserve access to those territories. But privately, the speaker expected to recover only corpses when the extraction ships arrived in 5 days. On Kairos 7, the humans had reached a different conclusion. Hyun-woo stood at the edge of a newly formed ice bridge, looking across the chasm toward the area where he had detected the failing alien survivor. The storm was getting worse, but the bridge would not last long. If he was going to act, it had to be now. He loaded his pack with preserved meat, warm furs, and basic medical supplies. The pack was heavy enough to slow him down significantly, but he had enough stockpiled resources to equip a small expedition. The journey across the unstable ice was treacherous. Twice the bridge cracked under his weight. Once he had to jump across a gap that opened while he was crossing. But his weeks of survival training on this world had made him stronger and more agile than he had ever been. He found the alien in a collapsed shelter, barely alive. It was one of the Dominion warriors, a proud reptilian creature now reduced to shivering helplessness. Its scales were gray with cold. Its breathing was shallow and irregular. Hyun-woo set up his emergency shelter and got a fire started. He did not try to communicate directly, as that would violate the trial rules, but he left food and warm furs where the alien could find them. He treated the creature's frostbite injuries with his medical supplies. The Dominion warrior's eyes showed confusion and shame. Its species prided themselves on strength and independence. Being saved by a creature they considered weak was almost worse than dying. But Hyun-woo did not wait for thanks. He left enough supplies to keep the alien alive for the remainder of the trial, then began the dangerous journey back to his own territory. In the poisonous swamp, So Young was making her own rescue mission. The storm had revealed a consortium representative trapped on a small island surrounded by the most toxic waters in the swamp. The energy being was flickering weakly, its life force almost completely exhausted. So Young loaded a raft with her medical supplies and carefully processed food that might be compatible with the alien's energy-based metabolism. She navigated through the toxic maze using routes she had spent weeks mapping. The consortium representative was barely conscious when she reached the island. Its energy field was so weak it could barely maintain physical form. So Young began administering her experimental treatments, hoping that the processed plant medicines might provide some form of energy the alien could absorb. To her relief, the treatments worked. The alien's energy field stabilized and began to strengthen. She left a complete medical kit and enough processed food to sustain the creature for the rest of the trial. Like Hyun-woo, she did not try to communicate directly, but her actions spoke clearly enough. Deep in the forest, Taemin was conducting the most dangerous rescue of all. 2 collective members had been trapped in a ravine when the earthquake shifted the terrain. They were surrounded by the largest pack of predators he had ever seen. The creatures could smell weakness and were preparing for an easy kill. Taemin approached the situation like a military operation. He used his knowledge of predator behavior to create a distraction. Setting fires in carefully planned locations, he drove the pack away from the ravine. Then he rappelled down on ropes made from processed animal hide. The collective members were in terrible shape. Without their hive mind connection, They had barely been able to function. They had no food, no tools, and no idea how to survive in hostile territory. Taemin left them with enough supplies to reach safety and basic tools they could use to defend themselves. He also left detailed pictogram instructions showing safe paths out of the forest. He could not speak to them directly, but he could leave information they might be able to understand. The rescue took him all night and nearly cost him his life when the predator pack returned. But by morning, the aliens were safe and supplied. Near the volcanic fields, HFY was saving the life of the last surviving consortium representative. The energy being had been caught in a volcanic eruption and was badly injured. Its energy field was disrupted and chaotic. HFY used her knowledge of electromagnetic fields and her processed mineral medicines to stabilize the aliens' energy patterns. It was delicate work that required her to risk exposure to dangerous radiation levels. But she succeeded. The consortium representative's energy field returned to normal patterns. She left it with supplies and medicines that would help it recover fully. As the storm began to clear on day 27, the 4 humans returned to their territories. They had used up significant portions of their stockpiled resources, but they still had more than enough to complete the trial successfully. More importantly, they had ensured that most of the alien participants would survive to the end. In the council chambers, monitoring stations detected something unprecedented. All remaining participants were now showing stable life signs. The aliens who had been failing rapidly were recovering. Their resource levels were increasing instead of decreasing. How is this possible? Demanded the Dominion representative. Our warrior was dying. Now the readings show he has abundant food and supplies. The collective members were trapped and helpless, added the collective representative. Now they are safe and well supplied. The consortium representative flickered with confusion. Our surviving members were beyond recovery, yet they are now stable and strengthening. The council speaker studied the data carefully. Only one explanation made sense, but it seemed impossible. The humans, the speaker said slowly. They used the storm's new pathways to reach the failing participants. They shared their resources. Impossible, declared the Dominion representative. Why would they waste their own supplies on competitors? It makes no strategic sense. Furthermore, added the collective representative, such actions would reduce their own resource accumulation scores. They are sabotaging their own chances of winning the trial. But the evidence was undeniable. The humans had risked their lives and sacrificed their strategic advantages to save alien participants who were supposed to be their competitors. The council faced a disturbing possibility. They might have fundamentally misunderstood what the humans were trying to accomplish. Day 30 arrived with clear skies and calm winds. For the first time since the trial began, Kairos 7 seemed almost peaceful. The extraction ships appeared in the morning sky, their hulls gleaming against the blue atmosphere. At the designated pickup point, 11 participants waited for rescue. All were alive. All showed signs of adequate nutrition and health. This was unprecedented in the history of the trial of sustenance. Hyunwoo stood calmly beside his packed supplies. Even after sharing resources with multiple alien survivors, he still had enough food and equipment to last another month. His clothes were well made from processed animal hides. His tools were crafted with the skill of a master hunter. He looked healthier than when the trial had started. So Young waited near her organized collection of medicines and preserved foods. Her stockpile of medical supplies could have equipped a small hospital. She had also brought samples of the processed plants that could neutralize various toxins. Her scientific discoveries during the trial were worth more than all the resource points combined. Taemin had arrived with a travois loaded with preserved meat, processed hides, and crafted tools. His hunting success had been so complete that he could have fed a small village throughout a harsh winter. Despite sharing supplies with multiple aliens, his resource accumulation was still massive. HFY brought her collection of processed minerals, volcanic glass tools, and underground maps. She had not only survived in one of the planet's most hostile environments, she had learned to master it completely. Her medical knowledge had expanded to include treatments for conditions that most species had never encountered. The alien survivors stood in smaller groups, still amazed by their rescue. The Dominion warrior kept staring at Hyunwoo with an expression of confused respect. The collective members clicked softly to each other, trying to process what had happened to them. The surviving consortium representatives flickered with grateful energy patterns. When the extraction ships landed, the recovery teams expected to find a handful of barely alive survivors. Instead, they found what looked like a successful expedition. Participant status report, requested the lead extraction officer. All human participants successfully completed the trial. Hyunwoo replied formally. Resource accumulation objectives exceeded target levels. The officer checked his scanner readings. Confirmed. Human resource accumulation is... He paused, checking the numbers again. These readings cannot be correct. The instruments are functioning properly, So Young said. We can provide detailed documentation of all resources gathered. As the participants boarded the ships, the alien survivors began to speak about their experiences. Their reports reached the Galactic Council before the ships finished the journey back to Viridian Prime. The humans saved us, the Dominion warrior reported. I was dying of cold and starvation. The human called Hyunwoo risked his life to bring me food, medicine, and warm clothing. He asked for nothing in return. They shared their abundance freely. The collective members added, when we were trapped and helpless, Taemin drove away the predators and gave us everything we needed to survive. He could have left us to die and claimed our territory for additional resources. The consortium representative sent energy patterns that translated to pure amazement. So Young created medicines that could treat our energy-based physiology. Jihai stabilized our disrupted fields using knowledge we did not know biological beings could possess. They turned their greatest competitor's survival into their own mission. When the ships reached Viridian Prime, the Galactic Council was in chaos. Nothing like this had ever happened in the trial's history. The humans have invalidated the entire test, declared the Dominion representative. By helping their competitors survive, they have corrupted the results. More than that, added the collective representative, they have demonstrated that they do not understand the purpose of the trial. It was meant to identify the strongest species, not the most cooperative. But the council speaker was studying the final resource reports with growing fascination. Human resource accumulation, Hyunwoo Kim, 847 units. So-young Park, 923 units. Taemin, 15156 units. Jihai, 891 units. The numbers caused stunned silence in the council chamber. Total human resource accumulation, 3,117 units. The speaker continued. This exceeds the combined total of all other participants in the trial's recorded history. How is this possible? Demanded the Dominion representative. They shared massive quantities of their resources with failing competitors. That is exactly why it is possible, the speaker replied slowly. They accumulated so much surplus that they could save multiple dying aliens and still have more resources than any previous trial participants. The truth was becoming clear. The humans had not misunderstood the trial. They had understood it better than anyone else. They were never competing with the other species, the speaker continued. They were competing with the planet itself. Their goal was not to gather enough resources to barely survive. Their goal was to master their environment so completely that survival became effortless. In the human section, Hyunwoo was asked to explain their strategy. We did not hunt alone because we had to, he said simply. We hunted alone because we were so good at it we could afford to hunt for everyone. But why share your resources? Asked the collective representative. You could have won the trial by an even larger margin if you had kept everything for yourselves. What would we have won? So Young replied. Access to territories that we would have to share with species who resented us for beating them. We preferred to win access to territories that we would share with species who knew we would help them survive and thrive. Timon nodded. Humans work better when others succeed too. Strong allies are more valuable than defeated competitors. Besides, Jihai added, we had more food than we could eat, more medicine than we could use, and more tools than we could carry. Sharing cost us nothing and gained us everything. The Galactic Council faced an unprecedented decision. The trial results were clear. Humans had not only survived the death world, they had conquered it. Their resource accumulation was beyond anything previously imagined. They had demonstrated individual survival skills that surpassed every other species, but they had also demonstrated something that challenged the trial's basic assumptions. They had proven that true strength was not the ability to survive while others died. True strength was the ability to thrive so completely that you could ensure others thrived as well. The humans have earned access to the outer spiral territories, the council speaker announced. But more than that, they have demonstrated why they deserve to help develop those territories. What do you mean? Asked the consortium representative. The outer worlds are harsh and dangerous, the speaker explained. Most species would struggle to survive there even with our best technology. But the humans have shown they can master hostile environments so completely that they can make those environments support multiple species. The Dominion representative stood slowly. You are saying they should lead the colonization efforts? I am saying they should design them, the speaker replied. The humans have proven they think in terms of abundance rather than scarcity. When they develop the outer worlds, they will create systems that support everyone, not just themselves. As the council session ended, representatives from multiple species approached the human delegation. Perhaps we could discuss cooperative development agreements, suggested the Dominion representative. Our species have much to offer each other. We would be honored to share our knowledge of hive-based resource management, added the collective representative. Our energy processing techniques could complement your biological mastery, offered the consortium. Representative Hyunwoo smiled. We were hoping you would say that. Humans have always believed that the best victories are the ones where everyone wins. The trial of sustenance had ended, but it had revealed something more important than which species deserved new territories. It had shown that the galaxy's greatest challenges would not be conquered by the strongest species acting alone, but by all species working together under the guidance of those wise enough to ensure everyone's success. In the end, the humans had won, not by being the best hunters, but by being the best at making sure everyone had enough to eat.